Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of AMC Presents. I'm your host, Hardy, and today we have a high-powered interview in store for you. Our very own AMC creator, William Ford, will be engaging in a fascinating conversation with the brilliant composer and musician, Gene Pritsker. Gene Pritsker is a name synonymous with innovation and diversity in the world of music. With a career that knows no bounds, he's renowned for his ability to seamlessly blend classical, jazz, rock, electronic, and world music into a mesmerizing tapestry of sound. His compositions are a playground of experimental techniques, making each piece a unique sonic adventure. So, grab a snack and get ready to immerse yourself in this captivating conversation between William and the musical maestro himself, Gene Pritsker. It's a high-energy show you won't want to miss.
I think, as I told you, I'm a psychologist.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
one of the things that I like to do a little bit is explore the interviewee's background. Because in order to understand who they are now, we've got to kind of understand where they came from. Not
Yeah,
in a deep sort of way, but it kind of is nice to know a little bit. I do know
right.
you were born in Russia. Is that correct?
Yes, in Leningrad.
Oh, okay. And you came here in the late 70s.
Yes, in 78. I was 7 years old,
Okay,
78.
I was
So,
going to ask, do you have many recollections of living in Russia?
I was seven, so not so many like recollections, but I have some overall memory of happy overall childhood in Russia, surrounded by lots of music. Both my parents were musicians, and working musicians in Russia. So it was always the operas and ballets and my father's, whatever jazz band stuff. So it's constant. Something was going on.
So your parents were musically inclined.
They were musicians, both of them. Yeah, they still are. Yeah. hmm
And
I mean, they are, and they're professionally. And when they came to America, my father became a piano tuner. And my mother did other jobs, but in Russia they studied music, and my father was quite known in Leningrad as had in his own band. My mother was a pianist and played Russian traditional instruments.
did they encourage you to play an instrument early on?
Yeah, well, in Russia, it's kind of everybody does. So I took up the violin at age 4, and I was pretty terrible at it for a long time. Even when we came here, I continued doing it until I was 12, and finally, I found the guitar, and I really wanted to play it. And I asked my parents if it's okay if I switch, and they're like, yes, because they got so tired of hearing me practice. I never got better on the violin. I was always like out of tune. So they were very happy that I switched to another instrument. But I did study violin from the age of 4. And I think the teacher I had was like kind of a famous teacher who had all these other young virtuosos, and he was just a friend of my father. He was like all these prodigies, but I was not. He just took me on as a favor to my father, and he was
Sure.
like a famous teacher that a lot of people study with. But I was awful. He would like scream at me, and there was always tears, and it was not. Yeah, it was not a good. It was like the old Russian school, be good or.
So when you came to the US, you played the violin also?
I was still playing. Yes, I was still. That was my.
And how old were you when you transitioned to the guitar?
At 12, I started liking rock music and heavy metal music, and I really wanted to play that. And so my father got me a guitar, and I started really just spending all my time in that. I'm like, look, no more violin. I'm just gonna do this. And they're like, yeah.
Were you self-taught on the guitar, or did you take lessons on it?
No. I took, again, friends of my father's, other musicians. They would. I had a couple of teachers that were very good, mostly jazz guitarists. And then I switched to classical guitar as I went along a little. I went to classical music pre-college on classical guitar before I delved completely into composition. But yeah, I studied for a while in my teenage years.
If you were to name one person who specifically influenced you early on in music, would you say that's one of your parents? Or was there
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
else?
No, it would be both my parents. They would encourage me to, do their to their dismay later on, because they thought, oh, he'll come to America and become something that makes lots of money. But when they realize, okay, this guy's only doing music, they're like, fine. But yes, but definitely from an early age, they were, as I did to my son, who's also a musician. He's 19, he's also a musician. Just because that's what they saw, the talent, the interest, or whatever, and that's what they knew, so they would teach me that. So yeah, I would say my parents.
From 12 forward, you played the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do like garage rock bands and that kind of stuff?
I mean, yes, I had some rock bands, but the truth is, I was a little more sophisticated just because I came from. I mean, not saying that in a pompous way, but just because I came from classical music, that my mother, we would listen to. My mother would take me to all these concerts, but my jazz music, and rock music actually was. I came to rock music after kind of listening to a lot of classical and jazz music, which was most of what was in Russia, what my parents would listen to. So I was my musical tastes weren't like, let's play three chords and jam. I was more interested already in doing something. And that's why actually heavy metal to me was more interesting than other rock, because heavy metal was a little more complicated. There was, changing mixed meters and harmonically and melodically a little more interesting than just like your typical rock and roll. So that I really was drawn to that. And when I heard this one guitarist, Yngwie Malmsteen, who played very fast, and he would play, in fact, he would put like Paganini by Lincoln concertos in the solos. I mean, he played that at that speed even faster. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. So I would practice. I was almost like practicing classical music on electric guitar, this type of thing. I wanted technique and to be able to play all these like Paganini and stuff like that.
So when you were playing metal,
mm-hmm.
did you analyze it as you just did, as
I
being
think so.
rhythm? So you
Yeah,
understood it at that level as opposed to kind of an intuitive.
I think so. I think that's what it drew me to it, but I also knew that this is so much more interesting and than like the stuff I'm hearing on. I would listen to Top 40 radio, and I like Top 40 radio, whatever. Probably when I was maybe 10, 9, 10, 11, and then when I got into metal, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is something a little more. And as I went along, of course, through metal, actually, I went back to classical music and discovered Stravinsky, and through that discovered Frank Zappa. So kind of, for me, so when me and you were talking a little bit about genres, but the truth is I never talk about genres. For me, music is like one big musical landscape of the world. We're this little tiny planet in this huge universe, and we got music coming out of this planet, and we subdivided it into a million little pieces, but that's all nothing. It's it's the music coming out of the world. So for me, going back between Zappa to Stravinsky to Mendelssohn is amazing. I love Mendelssohn, to Bach, of course, and as I went on, jazz fusion and all these type of things. But to me, it was it was all just like a very typical progression of my mind, getting things that are more what I wanted, what I wanted to hear, more interesting, more mind engaging. I don't know if that's that's the right word, but yeah.
When you graduated from high school, you went to college in music?
Yeah, when I studied, so I discovered composition while in high school, but I was going every Saturday to Manhattan School of Music pre-college, and for classical guitar. But I took a composition class with a great and I still work with him. He's a great pianist and composer. His name is Christopher Vasiliadis, and he had this composition class for non-composers, and that's it. I'm like, this is this is all I want to do. And I had an opportunity to write for the jazz band that we had there, and I was sitting there like, this is all I want to do. I want to put black little notes on paper and have other people play it, my ideas, and So when I went to college, to Manhattan School of Music as the conservatory, I went as a composer major, so no more guitar. I mean, I played it for myself, whatever, but it wasn't I wasn't going to sit around practicing other people's music, that's for sure.
And did you go beyond then the bachelor's degree?
I only got my bachelor's, and then I really got my master's and doctorate in the world. I went out and I started doing things. And a lot of the teachers, so my teacher in my high school music was Gianpaolo Braccali. He passed away now, but he was a great, from Italian tradition, La Scala, and he really like he was just a great, like a father figure type of thing. And he's like, look, man, you don't need this master's whatever degree, just go out. Because as in college, I was already started this group called Absolute Ensemble that me and my friend Christian Yarvi have. Started another my group Sound Liberation. I produced every year like 6 or 7 concerts with my music. I mean, it was just I was there for 4 years. I was doing a lot, and they saw, my teacher and others. They saw that, like, what is this degree? What do I need this for? I'm not gonna teach. I mean, I was never really interested in teaching this, even though I teach a class now in Juilliard, but only because it's Juilliard and they asked me. But really, I don't. I'm not so interested in teaching. So after bachelor's, I went and I just started producing concerts and writing lots and lots of music.
Sure. I asked Chat GPT
Mhm.
what it knows about you. And
Okay.
let me read what it says.
Oh no.
Gene Pritsker is a composer musician known for his eclectic and innovative approach to music. All right.
Nice.
Pritzker has created a diverse body of work that spans various genres and styles, blending classical, jazz, rock, electronic, and world music elements. His music often incorporates experimental techniques and fuses these diverse influences to create a unique sonic experience. Oh my goodness. Does that seem accurate to you? Is that what you're aiming for?
Yes, 100%. And yeah, they didn't. I mean, it sounds a little generic. I know where the Chat GP pulled from which review, and because it pulls words from the internet and stuff. So it's yeah, it's fine. It's all good, and it's true. I do strive for that, but further than that, we're talking a little about that. I was always trying to hear things that expand your mind from something more complicated, whatever. So really, the truth is, I really write music for one person, and it's myself. And I'm really trying to write music that I want to hear, that I just cannot find in the world. And I know maybe other composers have said this before, or writers, but I'm really trying to create what I feel is missing, what I want to listen to. I'm really writing my favorite music. I mean, and I'm not just saying that in a bragging pompous way. It's just the truth. This is what I want. What I write is exactly what I want to hear. So for me, that's really always the goal: is am I pleased? Is this what's missing? Is this what I wanted to hear? And many times it's a yes.
I was actually going to ask you that question, who
Oh,
you were
sorry.
writing the music for. And actually,
Yeah.
it's a good explanation, because it would seem to me that if you're a composer today and you say, I want to write for the masses, you're probably going to be disappointed, because oftentimes composers don't have their music played more than once. So,
Right.
I mean, that's the way it is.
That's part of it. But I mean, saying that, so if somebody does commission me and they say, look, I'm interested in a minimalistic piece or whatever, like these that remind whatever. Now, I'm not gonna say, go to hell, I'm gonna do write whatever I want. I'll take the commission and I will. It's actually a challenge for me. Can I still write that piece that I'm interested in, but with this new caveat that somebody gave me and they're paying me for it? So let's, and they're gonna perform it. And hey, and I found that sometimes I've surprised myself where the piece I really like, maybe, but might have not done it if somebody didn't say, can you do this? Even if I might not agree with this. I actually just did I orchestrate these movies for Hollywood, and I'll work with these guys. So I just did this new movie, German movie, and they asked me to write a whole bunch of music in the style of John Adams, Harmony Lear, yeah, Harmony Lear, right? Yeah. And so I listened to Harmony Lear, and it was, I always liked that piece. Actually, that was always, I enjoyed it. I'm like, well, how am I going to make this myself? And I had to write a whole bunch of music in the style of like a few, like 10 bars here, 20 bars here, and then I would expand and make like a 5-minute piece and that, but with my own thing. And actually, we just recorded it in the summer, and it was, and even the conductor said, this is better than Harmony Lear. This is much more interesting, but still had that what they wanted to hear. What I did, and then they would put some electronics and do some movie stuff over it, whatever. And all of a sudden, it's kind of a brand new thing. And it was first, it was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I really, I like it.
So,
and people like this, other people. So that's good.
That particular piece of music you did write in a minimalist style.
Yeah, like, but not just minimalist style as inspired by Harmony Lear. So like very specific, but not too specific that people will recognize. So it's kind of a tricky thingy.
So did you do the repetitive notes and
right.
drones and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, of course, all of that stuff. But changing the harmonies and the textures and a lot of things around it are not in the piece, perhaps, but sound that they could have been in the piece if you wrote it. This type of thing. And it's that. So for me, when I have to do stuff like that, it's a challenge, and I'm always looking from piece to piece, what's the next challenge? Because so I have 927 pieces of music, and it's hard to find the next challenge. But I always somehow next one I'm like, oh yeah, this I haven't really, yeah, let me explore this.
So when you wrote that piece of music, you knew the script before you wrote it, or did you write
I
it
did
and they excerpted?
I did know some of the script. I mean, they did send it to me, though I didn't have so much time to read it all. And it's an interesting movie that's coming out. But I don't really write movie music, so and script and that whole thing, that's not really the guys I work with, the composers I work with, they're very good at that. But I'm really just the orchestrator, and I orchestrate their music. And sometimes they will ask me to do some extra where they can't write this type of like maybe minimalistic thing, and I will write an orchestral piece. But I'm not a movie composer at all. I always tell people that
Okay.
for me, music is always first, and to create art to support another art is really kind of the antithesis of what I do. So
well, what's interesting, I was going to ask that question too.
Mhm.
Clearly says in your bio that you orchestrated.
Mhm.
So what's your relationship with the composer? How does that work?
I've been working with one team for the past 16 years, 15, 16 years. First movie we did was called Perfume, Story of a Murderer, which kind of died here. But in Europe, it's huge. Like, people love this movie. And then we did a lot of these other big. Cloud Atlas was another one. And the last one we did was called Matrix Resurrection. Of course, everybody heard of that. But it's really, I'm not on Hollywood. I'm not trying to be an orchestrator for, hire or whatever. I'm really just working with this one team. And the two composers that work here is Johnny Klimek and Tom Tickwer, who's also the director for Babylon Berlin, is another TV series that we do that are actually, and they're really good at what they do. They know how to write music that's catchy and interesting and supports the film. And for me, they just asked me to, well, first they asked me to orchestrate it, to make nice colors and textures and all that stuff, and also just to make it a little more, a little of me. They just want a little of me. They don't want too much of me, because
Right.
then it won't be movie music. But these two guys that I work with, we just happen to now be very good friends, and so that's really our relationship. I think if I was just hired by some composer from Hollywood, or I don't know, might be a problem, because I don't really work that well with others.
I really want to just understand the process, because I thought it was fascinating when you said that you orchestrated it. So do they like give you themes,
Well,
or
look,
they give you a whole
there's no one
score and
answer.
they say you orchestrate it?
It depends. Sometimes it'll be like, very little material, some MIDI piano, and I'll orchestrate and go crazy. And they say, Gene, go crazy. Sometimes it's a whole Logic session with they already had somebody layer everything on, and it's kind of orchestrated, but then I'll make it work for a real orchestra, and make it better a little than what you could do with samples and electronic stuff.
Sure.
Sometimes it'll just be like an electronic, like weird, and I'll transcribe like a synthesizer and create that orchestra. I mean, it could be, it's many different things. It's many different layers. So there's never one thing. It's not, I mean, back in the days, somebody would write a piano score and they'd give it to the orchestrator, and he would orchestrate it, right? I mean, that's kind of like John Williams type of thing. John Williams, I think, put in like clarinets. He actually orchestrated in his piano score a little, and they just gave the orchestra to slash it out. But this is a little different process. And sometimes they'll have like, oh, this section we don't have much. Can you just add stuff? So it's like, okay, now it's actually an orchestrator plus additional music, this type of thing. So,
all right.
But in the end, they're the ones scoring. They're the ones putting the music under under the movie, and people running and people talking, whatever.
Right.
So I don't do it. That's really movie scoring. The rest is, we write music together. It is a team process, and it's nice. I like it.
All right.
But it's not something I do for my own music in general.
Got it.
With these cats, I enjoy doing it. So
All right.
it's fun.
That's interesting. Appreciate that. When you compose a piece of music, and I know genre is a kind of a difficult concept, but if you have something that morphs between starting out, for example, as kind of classical style, whatever that means, and you move on to a more pop kind of segment of the music, when you're doing the classical, I assume you notate it all out.
I notate everything out. I'll answer your question very simply. I have hip hop music that is notated to the last hi-hat open closed. So everything I write is notated. So I consider all my music in the classical category as that you're putting black dots on paper and everything's notated and it's all controlled by me, by the composer, unless I want it to have not control, like John Cage and other or jazz musicians do, where you have a section where it says improvise over this chord progression, but this is where you improvise. So everything is basically controlled from beginning to end, even the improvisation of it, even the rhetoric elements that I might have in it. So every element is controlled with notation. And it really doesn't matter what genre it is. It has zero, it doesn't matter.
All right.
But improvisation, the thing is, people, I think, and I make this point sometimes when I do improvisation classes and some workshops, is people associate improvisation with jazz and pop music of the 20th century. But this is very wrong, because improvisation's been around longer. In fact, it's been around, I can make the argument that it's been around longer than notated music, because harmony started with improvisation. In the Gregorian chant, the only reason we started getting the next note is people improvising over the chant and singing a fourth up, and then, oh, that's cool, and then somebody notated it and like created rules, and we have harmony. But during Bach was an improviser, Mozart was a Beethoven, all these guys, they would improvise their own cadenzas. Paganini, all these guys, improvisation was a big part of the Western culture until the early 20th century, when everything, Schoenberg and like kind of modernly more composed, everything was more notated. I mean, we still had Rachmaninoff and stuff. Those guys were still performing and improvising and things. But then you had this kind of school of everything's very notated, and it's cool. The Romantics, maybe even later Romantics, also started it. And then jazz took over, as that's where the improvisation is. And that's what we have in our mind. But it's, jazz rules are jazz rules for improvisation. That's fine. You can learn those rules, learn them and forget them. But why, but improvise, I try to tell like bassoonists that you can improvise. You don't need to go to a jazz school to improvise. Just improvise, just play. What do you want to play? And I try to get that out of people. And when I see little bubbles, like little light bulbs go off, like, wait a minute, I could just play. Why can't I just play? Because they were kind of taught that unless you know certain rules, you shouldn't. And this is wrong.
Are there particular composers post 1900 that you particularly admire in what we would call the Western art music?
You mean 20th century?
Yeah,
yeah, of course. I admire. Well, I mean, so I always say my three favorite composers, and I even have this is my Duke Ellington shirt. So he's one of my favorite composers. Here, I'm wearing one, but my really top three. I have a top five. My top three is Mendelssohn, which I know is pre 19th century, Stravinsky, and Frank Zappa. So Stravinsky and Frank, and each three of them have a reason for me considering them something that influenced me as a composer. But for sure, Stravinsky, for me is in the 20th century's height, and Frank Zappa, what he did with music is kind of, I kind of feel like that's what I do, where he just did whatever, there was no genres. He was just playing his music. They put him on the rock, whatever, but that's all, nothing. So those composers are great. And of course, in the jazz, Schoenberg, I love the Third Viennese school, and Schoenberg was great. And, I listen to those guys all the time. But in the jazz world, like Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk was a huge influence on me. These, I would say are some of my top composers. I know I'm forgetting people right now, but just listing 20th century cats, those would be for sure very high on the list of inspiration. And
why Mendelssohn?
So Mendelssohn, melodically, Mendelssohn speaks to me the most. I think there's great melodies, from Beethoven to all the Romantics, whatever. But Mendelssohn's melodies, I don't know. And partly when I was in pre-college, my high school music, I was in the chorus. And this is before I decided I'm going to be composer. I was still classical guitar, but I was in the chorus, and we did Walpurgis Nacht by Mendelssohn. And I was just standing in the middle of this chorus, and I had to stop singing. This music just washed over me. And I heard all the voices. I heard things, the counterpoint, and all around me. I'm like, this is it. It's still one of my favorite pieces. And then the more I listened to him, so partly because those melodies speak to me because they got me at a very young age. I mean, whatever, 17, 16, 17. So that could be, a lot of it. But really, and also all three of those composers that I mentioned, as soon as you hear, and this for me is the mark of a great, good, whatever composer, is as soon as you hear three notes of them, you know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people that really finding your voice is everything in the composer. And I've been told that people, they might like or dislike my music, but if they hear it, they know it's me. And actually I don't care if they don't like it. That is the biggest compliment that a composer could get, as far as I'm concerned. And, and I'm aware of that because of those, for instance, 3 composers that I mentioned, and these, everybody else I mentioned. You hear like 2 minutes, 2 seconds of them, this is who it is. For me, that's like one of the most important things.
So I have a question about Stravinsky.
Yeah.
Some recently, there's discussion that maybe he peaked too early. Maybe that the big 3 ballets were pretty much it, and he spent the rest of his career not being nearly at that level.
Weird. Have you heard Symphony in 3 Movements? I mean, anyway, we could go. I could get into pieces that are later that I think are amazing.
Okay.
I could definitely pick pieces later and earlier that maybe are not on the level of what we just said. One was Soldier's Tale. I mean, Soldier's Tale, one of the greatest pieces. That might be early too. Maybe it's a little late.
All right.
I don't know. But he has a lot of music that's great. In fact, I've never really heard a piece of. I mean, there's some of the neoclassical stuff, which I like, and I like what he's doing, but like to a point, like what I talk about a little bit about minimalist music. Like I'm not a Philip Glass fan, but Philip Glass, when he came out doing what he did, nobody was doing that. That was like mind blowing. Now he never changed, and he keeps doing the same thing for whatever. That's his problem. But Stravinsky, as a true artist, was changing all the time, and then he changed and started doing this neoclassical thing, which nobody was really doing the way he was doing it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll research. Maybe there was somebody before him, but I'm pretty sure when you hear that Stravinsky neoclassical period, you're like, what is this? Now you could like it or dislike it, but he was pushing boundaries with that, like serious boundaries. He was like, oh great, we're now in this atonal, let's go the other way. And then he, of course, what did he do? He went and became 12 tone. But the way he did his 12 tones is he would make his matrix, his with major chords. So it would be like triads or major minor chords. So it still sounded like Stravinsky. It didn't sound like Schoenberg. And you could like or dislike that music, but it's brilliant. It's really everything I hear of it. I don't know. Wait, who says he peaked in the? Well, I think I know people who only like those, Russian boys. I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not.
All right.
Neither here or there. I don't know. I mean, we that we could get. There's like the taste thing, which is fine, but then there's the. I always say there's really only one judge of art, all art. There's one judge. It's not you. It's not me. It's not a bunch of people living today. It's time.
Right.
So time takes a combination of a lot of people living. A lot, much more people than like right now. Everybody agrees that this guy is great and this guy is bad, whatever, but that's nothing. But time really, I mean, time gets it wrong sometimes because it might have been a great composer whose house burned down and we'll never know when all the scores are gone, right? Or it might have been a composer who had like just bad luck and nobody played him. But very rarely there's not so many composers where we're still, because there was a lot of composers who were very famous, like during Mozart's time, and they weren't very good. And they are forgotten for a reason. And there's a lot of people who thought they were better and greater than Mozart, whatever. And I've heard some of them. There was an orchestra here in New York that found these old scores and played composers in Mozart's time that nobody knows anymore. And when you hear this concert, you're like, oh, okay, now I know why they're forgotten. It's very interesting.
Well,
so
I subscribe to a channel on YouTube that has undiscovered composers from the past. Or well, it's not that they were undiscovered; they just don't get much attention. But you can see why they don't get much attention.
Oh, I'm telling you, there's something. Time gets it right, man. It's not most of the time, but a lot of the time.
And for some of them, it's almost like the equivalent of having a machine develop it. Do you know what you put the parameters in the AI and it develops this piece of music? And some of those composers strike me that way. That's as close an analog as I can come to, but that's what sometimes they sound like, and you can understand why they're not great.
But you know what you're saying? You're saying they didn't have a voice.
Yes.
That's a simple.
Exactly.
They just, they sounded like anything else around them, and they may have been successful. They might have been making a career and maybe popular at the time, but sooner or later, people,
Yes, right. You sent me some videos that I kind of want to include. Let's see, there was Reinventions, Pretty Maidens, Slam Dancing.
Yeah.
Time Does Not Bring Relief. I thought that was a brilliant video, by the way.
Thank you. I made it. That's my video.
It's really wonderful. The editing is wonderful. The music is
iMovie.
yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Thank you. Thank
The one that I'd like to talk about, because we don't have that much more time, is
Sure.
Trump, the Trump piece.
Right. So I'll tell you quickly. On election night 2016, right? I did this whole violin concerto called Trump Theatrical Concerto, and the main violinist is Philip Quint. He's a violinist, you might know him. He played the devil on violin. My friend Charles Coleman, singer, played Trump. There was Melania. There was all these actors and whatever. And it came, and we did it in New York, and we're happy. Election night, yeah, this is going to be great. And of course, the night turned out pretty badly for us in the end. But and because I thought, it turned out badly, and I'm like, oh boy, well, I don't think this piece will be played again. But it was a good performance. But then I had this opportunity to play with the MDR Orchestra, and I thought I'd write a DJ concerto based on that same music, but instead of the violin being the solo, the DJ is a soloist. So I forgot the video I showed you. It's for full orchestra. The violin concerto was a little chamber ensemble, like 15-piece chamber ensemble of violin, but this is a full orchestra and me as a soloist and DJ. And so it's called Trump a DJ concerto. So it's a little.
What was the point of it?
Well, initially the point was to just highlight this crazy guy's. I mean, and it wasn't bad or good. It was just a pure. This is the guy. This is what he said. So I'm DJing his actual words, and in the violin concerto, the violinist is playing the devil who's influencing him to do this. Like, why would somebody act like this? So in my whole psychological little thing, like the devil, the violinist, who's usually in classical music, the devil, right? Associated with the devil.
Did you get any pushback on that piece?
People loved it. I mean, I didn't get any. There might have been at the club some Trump supporters who came thinking that it was a pro-Trump thing, and either they left but whatever. Nothing bad happened. And in Europe, this concert was in Germany. They loved it. They wanted to do it. So, and I performed the violin concerto in Austria 2 summers after 2008 at a festival. So yeah, so it got a little legs, but not as much as I wanted. And I was, I don't know. I'm like, if he loses, will he get performed more? If he wins, will he get performed more or less? But I don't know. Just it was fun experience. It's kind of a little study into a little deranged mind as far as I'm concerned, deranged personality, but an interesting personality, and just putting it out there. I mean, with of course sarcasm. I mean, obviously, sure. There's no pro-Trump there, but there is definitely sarcasm, just because it's built in. It's built into his personality. Right. So it's fun. It's fun to do.
It's like Gilbert and Sullivan. They were constantly poking fun of things, and of course. Today we listen to them and not knowing the social context of what they were writing often.
Which might happen to pieces like this for me as well. The only difference is we have much more documentation in the form of visual documentation. I mean, they had documentation, they had newspapers, but we don't know but now we have a zillion hours. I don't think Trump will be forgotten he'll go down in history as some kind of a weird thing, and people could watch these videos, and so my Trump concerto won't be like, oh, who I don't think it will be that,
Right.
Or maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think you think about that so much or worry about that so much.
To introduce to you today a man who I have loved and respected my entire life, my father, Donald J. Trump.
The one other piece was Vivaldi's Hot House.
Yeah, Vivaldi's Hot House. So this is me taking Vivaldi's Summer and mixing it with Hot House by it was made famous by Dizzy Gillespie, but written by, I forgot the composer, but Dizzy Gillespie used to play it, the student, and mashing them together. And Laura St. John, violinist, we performed it, and we're gonna have another concert, but she decided to make this very hip video of it. She's also a videographer, so we recorded it, made a video, and it's on my new album Better Now, which is my band Sound Liberation. And the album ends with this Vivaldi's Hot House, which is kind of bebop, I don't know, classical, crossover classical, whatever they call it. I don't know. Again, genres, it's very hard.
Is that published on Composers?
Compose Concordance Records.
Yes.
We have a record label, so yeah, we released it on the record label, the whole album, and there's a bunch of music on it that I've been spreading around and making, including Time Does Not Bring Relief. It's also on that album.
I cannot believe how fast this time went. This was unbelievable. And
that was good.
Your enthusiasm is absolutely wonderful. I so appreciate it. And
thank you so much.
You've thought about so many of these issues so well. It's been great.
Great, thank you. And looking forward to seeing and hearing.
Oh yeah, it's great. All right, man. Appreciate it. Say hello.
We made it. Less than a minute.
Say hello to Deborah for me.
I will. I will.
Right.
I'll see her.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's hear it for William and Jean. Thanks again for watching MC Presents. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please become a patron at any level at www.patreon.com/AtlantaMusicCritic. This is Hardy. See you soon.